President Trump just announced that he's taking over the Gaza Strip. Forget about two-state solution. He's taking it over and he's going to develop it. Oh my goodness, we've got a broadcast for you today. Is this prophetic? What's going on? We're going to dive into the entire history of Gaza, how it relates to all of us today, the whole conflict between the Palestinian people and the Jewish people that live in the state of Israel, and how does it affect biblical prophecy? We're going to talk about it and unpack every bit of it right after this. Hello, everyone. Jim Staley, Passion for Truth Ministries. And yes, this is an explosive new development in prophecy in the end times, I believe. I'm going to go through some scriptures to show you, I believe, how we've got something cooking for the end times here. This is the most profound undertaking by any country, I believe, honestly, since Napoleon. And yes, President Trump, maybe you can put him on that level. Some people definitely would, or maybe Alexander the Great, you pick one. But at the end of the day, this is a huge story and it needs to be told. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the entire history of the Gaza Strip as it's known today. Where did it start in biblical times? How did it transfer to different ownerships? Is it even a country, a state? Is it sovereign? What is it? And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to do it right now. So first and foremost, if you're not subscribed to this channel, would you do so right now? Just hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any broadcast every single Saturday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Yours truly does a verse-by-verse study through a particular book of the Bible. Right now, we're working through the book of Romans from an academic perspective and a practical perspective, but different than any commentary you've heard. This is going back to the original Jewish culture, the Hebraic context, idiomatic expressions. What did the authors believe when they originally wrote the scriptures? And then we pull from that. And wow, have we been discovering the gap between what Paul really meant and what today's Christian theological seminaries have come up with. It's quite a gap, and we're talking about it on Saturday. So make sure you join us each and every Saturday, 11 a.m. All right, let's talk about President Trump and what he just did. So first of all and foremost, as most of you know, on October 7th, over a year and a half ago now, the people of Gaza, the governing people of Gaza, I should say, the Hamas terrorist organization has kidnapped hundreds of people, killed over 1,200 people, and started a war. And I think that's extraordinarily important for you to know. Israel did not start this war. They just want to be left alone. They just want to be in peace. It was Hamas that started the war. Most of the Palestinian people that live in Gaza fully support this war. Inside of their local elementary schools and their schools, they actually teach little children in stories using the Jew and the Palestinian, and the Palestinians always killing the Jews. So they're teaching terrorism from the very, very young ages. We see that even leaked on the internet over there in the Gaza Strip. So the people of the Palestinian people themselves, although many of them are innocent, they are allowing the terrorist organization to live among them because they hate the Jews as well. So I think it's really important to start off right off the bat that the rhetoric about Israel imprisoning the Palestinian people and forcing them out of the homeland and forcing them into this area over here, beachfront property, I should say, is just insincere from the very beginning. And we're going to walk through the history and prove that. But before we do, I'm going to wait till the end of the broadcast. I'm going to go through some scriptures, and you're just not going to believe it because the scriptures actually tell us what's going to happen to Gaza. It's even going to tell us what's going to happen with the hostages and what happens after that. So stick around to the very end. I'm going to share what I believe, how all of this fits into prophecy, if it does at all. All right, so let's begin and go through the entire history of Gaza from Bible to today. And then at the end, I'm going to share with you some scriptures that prophetically tell us, I believe, exactly what happened, what's going to happen. I'm going to give my own prophetic insight of what the end times possibly could be shaping up to look like if, in fact, this goes through, this deal where President Trump takes over Gaza and develops it. What is this going to look like? All right, here we go. First and foremost, it's important for you to know that when people say Palestine, where did that come from? Well, Palestine is really the ancient word for Philistines, okay, which is not ever in the Bible a good thing. Those were the people that fought against Israel from day one. All right, let's start all the way back in the time of the Exodus. So the Israelites were given the promised land by Abraham, passed down to Isaac, passed down to Jacob. They lived there, about 70 in all with the 12 sons of Jacob. Then they were displaced because of the drought. They moved in with Joseph in Egypt, who was controlling all of Egypt, and they stayed there for 400 plus years. It was during that time that the people, the pagans of the area, moved in, squatted on the promised land, and then God brought them out of Egypt, brought them back to the promised land, and Joshua was the one that led them. So they go to take back what was rightfully theirs that God specifically gave them, but Gaza remained independent. The Philistines were the main ones that lived there, and it was used to attack Israel all the way back in the time of Joshua. All right. Now, we're going to move forward all the way into the first century during the time of Christ. Gaza was rebuilt in the Roman era. So now the Romans come along, and it was rebuilt by Pompey Magnus. And then after that, it was given to Herod the Great, which I'm sure you're familiar with from the Bible 30 years later. Now, if we moved to 70 AD, Herod's temple is completely destroyed, Jerusalem is ransacked, and the Jews were banned from being in Jerusalem, but they were allowed to stay in the area. All right, so now the temple's destroyed in 70 AD, and they're still living in the area, but it's completely destroyed. Move forward in 132 to 135 AD, there was a second Jewish revolt called the Bar Kokhba revolt. That revolt was a line in the sand by Rome. They had enough. They came in and they fully crushed the Jews. 500,000 people died. And in return, to be spitting in the face of the Jews, Rome renamed the entire area after the Philistines and called it, for the very first time, Palestina. And so that's where we get the Palestinians from. It's actually an ancient word that goes back to the Hebrew word that means Philistines, the ancient enemies of Israel, all the way back to David and Goliath, my friends. And so from there, we're going to move forward 500 years to the year 634, and this is what starts the Muslim area. So from 135 to 634, the Jews are still living there, but most of them very poor, and it had been completely destroyed. And then all of a sudden, Muhammad comes in with his gang, and Islam takes over that particular area. Now, from there, they rule it all the way. That's where the Dome of the Rock came from, by the way. They rule it all the way up to the early 1500s, where the Ottoman Empire began. That's today's Turkey. And the Ottoman Empire started in 1517, and they took over the whole area, including Gaza. Okay. Now, from there, the Ottoman Empire ruled all the way up until the 1917. All right, this is the next most significant thing that happened in Israel, for Israel, I should say, and the Gaza Strip. Within 1917, the British Foreign Secretary, Lord Arthur Balfour, issues a statement which would be called the Balfour Declaration. Now, what that statement basically said was it favored the idea of a state for the Jewish people, because at this point, you've got millions of Jewish people that are displaced now all over the world at that time. And there's all kinds of people that are Jewish and Arab, I should say, living in the area. But because the Jewish people were living there for thousands of years, and they had been displaced by the Romans, then they were displaced by the Arabs, and then they were displaced by the Ottomans, had worldwide support. It was accepted internationally, and the original land was extraordinarily large. As you can see on your map, this was the original land that the Balfour Declaration and the entire international community voted on as to be Israel, which quite frankly is very close to the borders that Abraham was given from God. Now move forward in 1921, the British decided to decrease the size to what it actually is today. In 1947 is where everything begins to really take shape. Now, all of that was kind of really quick history to kind of give you an idea of bringing it up to what most people are familiar with, which is when Israel became a state in 1948. But in 1947, the UN, following the Holocaust, decided to make the land that was going to be given to Israel even smaller. And this is where it gets interesting. They partitioned out land to be given to the Arabs, and they partitioned out land to be given to Israel. Now, understand, Israel's not in control of this. This is the United Nations. So the idea and the false propaganda that's out there by the left and the liberals that Israel came in and got rid of all the Palestinians is just simply not true. It was the United Nations and the entire international community that knew that this land belonged to Israel, but there was a lot of Arabs living there, and they wanted to make it work. So they partitioned out land for the Arabs. They partitioned out land for the Jews. It's important to recognize that when the United Nations and the international community partitioned out this land and said, Israel, this is what we're going to give you. Arabs, this is what we're going to give you. Israel totally accepted the plan, but the Arabs fully rejected it. They didn't want anything to do with that plan. This is a critical part of history that's not taught, is the Arabs were the ones that rejected having their own state. They didn't want it. They wanted all of it. So they didn't want what was given to them, which was some of the best parts of Israel, by the way. They rejected it because they didn't want to live with the Jewish people, period. Even though the Jews were there first, the international community knew that, the United Nations knew that, the Arabs that were there said, no, we're not going to do it. And right after that, 5 Arab countries declared war on Israel, and in May of 1948, Israel declared their own official independence. They won the war. So the last time that I checked, when one country goes to war against another country, whoever wins gets the land. That's pretty much how it's worked for thousands of years. Proof positive, the Greeks came in and overtook Israel in a couple hundred BC. The Romans came in, took over Israel, and then the the Arabs came in, and then the Ottomans came in. Whoever wins the war wins the land. That's just how it works, okay? And so when you look at 1948, they won the war that, again, they didn't start. It was the Arabs that just didn't like the plan, so they decided to attack Israel. Rather than sit down with the United Nations and work out a better deal, they flat out just decided to attack Israel, and Israel won against 5 countries. Now, it's incredible that this even happened because Israel is a fledgling small organization at that time. And it was because they had leadership, because they had organization, because they desired to come back to their homeland, they formed their government and said, look, they gave us this land, and you guys didn't want it. Why are you attacking us? But we're going to fight you. They won the war. That's how Israel became a state, okay? Now, Israel prevailed, and Gaza, except for Gaza, same thing back in the time of Joshua, it remained in Egypt's control, okay? So you can see on your screen exactly what Gaza looked like at the time that 1948, but it was under the control of Egypt. Now get this, it's not a state. It's not a nation. It's not even sovereign from the perspective of there's no ownership of it. Egypt was in control of it. Now, still, look, at the end of the day, it's just land that's under other countries' control. So when we move this forward to the time of President Trump, when he says, look, we're going to own it, this is not something new. Now, I know the left is having a fit over this, but the reality is Egypt did the same thing, okay? And other countries did the same thing. Iran did the same thing. They are the ones that are fully in control. Everybody knows this. They are the ones that are funding. They funded Hamas, which was the ruler, the police state of Israel, or excuse me, of the Gaza Strip. So as we move forward here, it's important to know there was no ownership. This is not a country. This is simply land that people are living in because they lost a war, because they chose not to take the cards that the international community was going to give them, because all of this land was unspoken for. And so they said, hey, Israel, you can have this. Arabs, you get this. Arabs said no. Israel said yes. That's just how it works. Now, we can't rewrite history, but that's just the facts. Now, moving forward to 1967, Egypt decided, you know what, we're done. We're going to block the Tiran Straits, which would block trade to Israel. So now they're poking a war. They're going to poke the bee's nest, if you will, and they're going to try to start a war with Israel, and Israel wasn't going to have any of it. So they went to war, and it was a very short, miraculous war. I encourage you to watch There's documentaries on it, but it's called the 6-Day War because it only lasted 6 days. And Israel won, and this gave Israel control over the Gaza Strip. Again, Egypt was in control, Israel won, Israel now becomes in control of the Gaza Strip. This is back in 1967. This is when Jerusalem became the capital of Israel, all right? Now, in 1973, Egypt and Syria, they attacked Israel again, called the Yom Kippur War, but Israel won again. Again, there is a pattern here. Israel just wants to live in the land that they were given by both God and the entire international community, except for the Arabs that chose not to come to the table. Their modus operandi is war. That's just what they do. They've been doing it for thousands of years. The Philistines don't like Israel. They go to war. Israel didn't do anything. They just don't like the Jews. And ultimately, this goes back to Satan himself, who hates the people of God because he knew that it was through them that the Messiah was going to come. All right, now, a few years later, 1979, they agreed to sign a peace treaty. Israel, I should say, agreed to sign a peace treaty for land. They would give up land and give back all of the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza to Egypt, but Egypt didn't want Gaza. So they took the Sinai Peninsula, but they didn't want Gaza. So Egypt was originally in control of Gaza. Then Israel took it over from the war. And then Egypt said, hey, I don't want it. We don't want it anymore. So Israel remained in control because no one else wanted it. Again, history that doesn't get told. Israel never wanted control over Gaza. It was forced to take it over because nobody else wanted it. Okay. And so when you move forward from there to 1993, you have the PLO. Some of you are old enough to remember Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton in the 1993 signing of the Oslo Accords. A lot of people thought that was the beginning of the 7 years, last great tribulation that was coming, and the 2000 was going to be the end of time. It was called Y2K. It was crazy. If you're old enough to remember that, you remember they believed that the computers were all going to shut down and the world was going to come to an end. It was really crazy. People were selling their houses and everything because of this agreement. Now, what was this agreement? It was between the PLO, which was the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Israel. Now, what's interesting is the PLO was actually a terrorist organization, all right? But they came to the table and they negotiated, and what happened was they wanted to be the administrators of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which is really biblically called Judea and Samaria. Today, the secular media calls it the West Bank because the terrorist organization, the PLO, called it that. But the reality is it's the biblical Judea and Samaria, and Israel signed it. Okay, so Israel is fully in control of the Gaza Strip, and the PLO said, hey, we will guarantee your safety if you give us this land. So Israel gave up control of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And then what happened? This started nothing but terrorism. What's really interesting is that in modern times, there's so many people that are crying out, the Palestinians need their own state. It's just not fair. Israel's oppressor. But they don't know their history, because the reality is for the last 20 years, the Palestinians have had their own state, if you want to call it. Israel's not been there since 2005. They're not oppressing them. The people of the Gaza Strip are governing themselves, albeit through a terrorist organization, but they've had their own area for 20 years. All they've done is foster terrorism. So by giving the Palestinians their own state, what would that even look like? Because at the end of the day, they already have everything that they want. No one's there telling them what to do, but I digress. And you can see now, looking back, this was all a chess move by the terrorists to get Israel out of their living room so that they can start to operate and get their bombs working and so on and so forth. So now Egypt responded by setting up a blockade on the Gaza Strip, because Egypt was not happy that Israel was no longer in charge. And here's why. Okay, if you want to know why today Egypt doesn't want anything to do with the Palestinians, they don't want the Palestinians, even though they're all Arabs. They know that this is terrorist breeding grounds. And so they were so upset that Israel was moved out of the way and chose to withdraw from Gaza. Now there's no parent there, that Egypt put up a blockade on the Gaza Strip so they could protect their own people against terrorists in the Gaza Strip. Can you believe that? So Egypt now has to protect their own people because they know that the moment that Israel moves out, terrorism is going to just explode. And it did. But here's what happened. The very next year, after Israel removed themselves from the Gaza Strip, in 2006, Gaza had elections. Now remember, this is not even a country. This is just land that people are living on, and they're trying to form an organization to govern themselves, which is great. That's what Israel's always wanted. Hey, govern yourselves, be your own country. We're totally fine with that. Just leave us alone, all right? Now, in 2006, like I said, they had elections, and the PLO lost to another political arm that's not political at all. It was a military arm, and it was called, go figure, Hamas. Hamas decided they didn't just want to win the election, they wanted to get rid of the PLO completely. So they went to war, very, very bloody war with the PLO, and they won. Okay. Now Gaza was now in the hands of full-blown terrorists. And now you know what kind of government has been in control for the last 20 years in Gaza. It's been Hamas. They've been all along, the enemy has been setting up Gaza so that it's like a teenager that gets rid of the parents so he can set up his drug and alcohol parties and do what he wants to do. That's what's been going on. So in 2007, like I said, Hamas went to war with the PLO. They defeated them. And then from 2007 to 2023, Hamas has been attacking Israel. And this is why the Iron Dome was created. They didn't even need an Iron Dome. It was never, just like America has never had an Iron Dome, because we've never had rockets flying into America from Mexico and Canada. But Israel needed to do something, so they created the Iron Dome, because there hasn't been a single year where rockets haven't been fired into innocent civilian villages and cities in Israel. Think of this, ladies and gentlemen. For all of the people out there that are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, can you imagine the same people being sympathetic if Mexico, all the drug cartels that were in control, if they were in control of the Mexican government, and I'm not so sure that they aren't, but they were shooting missiles over into Texas and New Mexico and California, and thousands of people were being killed. And every single year, these missiles were flying over from Mexico with the same people that are fighting for the Palestinians, okay, that are supported by Hamas and support Hamas. Would they be saying, hey, we need to take care of all of these drug cartels? It's not fair that we're going in there and we're limiting them, or we're trying to attack them. No, we're defending our homeland. We would go in and destroy any terrorist organization. Israel didn't ask for this. They're simply tired of it. It's like a parent that's child is over and over and over again disobeys and disobeys and disobeys. At some point, the father stands up and says, enough is enough. And he says, if you're going to stay in my house, you got to play by my rules. Otherwise, son, you're out of here. And he kicks his son out of the house because he's constantly disrespectful, constantly beating up on his children, constantly destroying the house and wrecking the car. A parent can only take so much. And that's what's going on. Gaza was in their own room, and it was controlled by Israel, given up to Egypt, given back to Israel. Egypt didn't want it. Nobody else wanted it. And then they make a peace deal, and then they break the peace deal and kill thousands of Israelis over the course of 20 years. Israel had enough. So think about this. For those of you that think or have been heard of this bizarre lie that Israel has just been keeping the Palestinians in prison, this open-air prison on a beach, all right, since 2001, there's been attacks every single year, even though it was the Israelis that were supplying all the fuel, water, power, everything to the people of Gaza. You know why? Not because they were in control and they wanted to beat down the Palestinian people. No, the Palestinian people and their, quote, leadership had no capability of doing it on their own. Billions of dollars were sent into the Gaza over the course of 20 years. And do you know what they did with it? They built an underground terror network. It was Israel that put their money in to make sure the water stayed on, that the electric was there. It wasn't to take it. They didn't want to be there to begin with. Israel is doing them a favor. If Israel completely pulls out and they're not in charge of the fuel, water, power, whatever, the government of Gaza, which was a terrorist organization called Hamas that we're all familiar with now, they would never have turned on the water or electric except for them. Even the money that was sent over there by the last administration, the Biden administration, it was being funneled into Hamas via a humanitarian, quote, humanitarian organization that was really set up by Hamas. And our government knew it. And that's why President Trump is shutting it down, because he knows the money's not going to the people. Hamas doesn't care about the people. How could any government put military men and entire stockpiles of weapons and AK-47s in children's classrooms, in their schools and in hospitals, firing rockets from the grounds and the rooftops of hospitals and schools? You must hate your people. They're using them as human shields. All right, but let me get off my soapbox because we've got to get to the prophetic part of this, okay? Now, what does all this have to do with prophecy? The very first thing I wanted to do was share with you the history of Gaza so you know what's really going on in the world as it relates to Gaza. President Trump absolutely has the right to come in as the world power, the biggest country, the most powerful country, I should say, in the world is the United States of America. He is the leader of the free world. He is the emperor of Rome, aka in the first century. He has the right to come in and take control. I think he used the wrong word of ownership, but I believe he has the right to come in and take control of an area that is war-torn, destroyed. It's not a real state, never been a real country. It's never been sovereign. It's been owned before and controlled by Egypt. It was controlled by Iran. And so what would you rather have? Would you rather have Iran controlling the Gaza Strip and funding terrorists, or would you rather have the United States of America controlling Gaza and rebuilding it and making it a place for all nations? That is what he's doing. And I will tell you, I think it's the most humanitarian thing that any president could do. For some of the senators out there and people that are on the left that are saying that this is genocide and this is horrible and he hates the Palestinian people, I would say that is one of the most evil things that you could do, is send back the Palestinians into a completely destroyed, like out of a Hollywood movie, bombed buildings, blown up, and send them back there. Just say, hey guys, Gaza is now free of Hamas. You're free to go back home. Free to go back home to what? It's worse than living under a bridge. They're literally living under concrete. There's nothing there. President Trump is being, in my opinion, no matter what you think of him, I think it's the most humanitarian thing to do is to say, hey, some of these other countries, you need to I know you don't like the Palestinian people, Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Iran, but you're going to take them temporarily, and then we're going to form a coalition. We're going to rebuild Gaza the right way, and then we're going to make sure that terrorism isn't there and becomes a beautiful place that people can go and vacation and live on. And then the Palestinian people can come back. They will likely fund them to come back, and they'll have beautiful homes and a new place that does not have Hamas. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone came in and blew up my house and my neighborhood, my mayor said, hey, Staley's, you can go back to your house. It's destroyed, but you can go back to it. That's one option. Which is the better option? Me going back to a house that doesn't exist and sitting out in the weather underneath concrete and burned up wood, or the mayor saying, you know what? We're going to pool all of our assets together. We're going to rebuild your house. And when we're done, you can come back and you can live in it. What's the better option? I think most people would say the latter option is the most loving and humane option. So now, how does this affect prophecy? So let's go over to Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 4, where God actually prophesies that Gaza is going to be destroyed exactly the way it was. Let's go over there right now. Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 4 and following says, "For Gaza shall be forsaken, and Ashkelon desolate. They shall drive out Ashdod at noonday, and Ekron shall be uprooted. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast," those in Gaza, "the nation of the Kerethites. The word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines. I will destroy you, so there shall be no inhabitant. The seacoast shall be pastures with shelters for shepherds and folds for flocks. The coast shall be for the remnant of the house of Judah." God prophesies right here. Now, you don't have to believe in God. It doesn't matter. When God says it, it's done. He's going to give this land that was not used properly by the Philistines, by the people of Gaza, and he's going to give it to Judah. That's flat out what he said right here. I'm going to give it to the remnant of the house of Judah. They shall feed their flocks there in the houses of Ashkelon. They shall lie down at evening. For the Lord, listen, this is unbelievable. For the Lord their God will intervene for them and return their captives. You see, God all the way back here through the prophet Zephaniah prophesies that the people of Gaza are going to attack Israel. They're going to take their people captive. And God says, because they chose to do this, I'm going to uproot them. I'm going to burn their houses. I'm going to let Judah have it. And I'm going to return the captives of Judah. Isn't that unbelievable, my friends? So from here, we're going to go over to Amos chapter 1 and see what Amos has to say. Amos says this, "Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they took captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom." And what are they doing? Some of these are selling off, killing the hostages to deliver them to Edom. "But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour its palaces." That's exactly what happened. Is Gaza is not going to be inhabited any longer by terrorism. God prophesies it right here. So is this prophecy? Absolutely, it's prophecy in the making, because we now know biblically that Gaza is never going to be inhabited again by terrorists. Judah is going to be there, the Israel people, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, and it's going to be under the control of a coalition led by President Trump to make sure it never happens again. Now, my personal opinion, at the end of the day, how prophecy is going to unfold is the scriptures say that the end time Gog and Magog war is going to come out of the north. And so now that the Southwest has been taken care of, which is where almost all of the war has been coming from, is from early on Egypt in the south, Gaza, and Iran. There's only one place left. Iran has been eradicated and completely stripped. The rug's been taken out from them. The Hezbollah in the north has been dismantled beyond recognition. Gaza and Hamas has been taken care of, and Hamas is being eradicated. All 3 sides of the compass are safe. And there's only one place left. And the Bible says it's in the north, which is why Israel is trying to take care of the north as well. But as we speak, there is alliances being made that is between Syria, the new president of Syria, which used to be a terrorist, but now he wears a 3-piece suit, making deals with Turkey and with Russia, and that is going to put the Gog and Magog war right on the doorstep of Israel. And one of the fascinating parts of prophecy is it says that Israel is not going to have any walls. And when they say peace and safety, that's when the people from the north are going to attack. And then, of course, Israel comes back over the top and nukes Damascus, and it's flat and never to be inhabited again. And so the next thing to look for is, and by the way, the stage that's being set right now is simply removing the arms of terrorism from the west, the south, and the east, and the only thing left is the north. And so this is why I believe this move by Israel, eradicating terrorism out of the Gaza Strip and eradicating all of the weapons and the underground systems that were there to really destroy Israel. That was their game plan. Can you imagine if Israel found, the United States found hundreds of miles of underground tunnels right across the border in Mexico? Would we just allow that to happen? No, especially if they're firing rockets at us. We would take over that entire land, period. And everybody knows it. Whether you're on the left, center, or on the right, it doesn't matter. It is just a universal common sense that if that scenario I just painted was true, the United States would take over the entire northern part of Mexico and make sure our borders are secure. But yet, there are those that want to criticize Israel for doing the very same thing that we would do. As a matter of fact, we did it on 9/11, and they weren't even on our borders. We went over to Iraq and eradicated it and destroyed it, and then set up the largest military base in the history of mankind in Baghdad. Okay? Now, whatever you believe about that, you can believe about that. But that is not even on our border. How much more if we were being threatened by people right across the line? So at the end of this broadcast, I believe that President Trump not only has the right, but it is just simple history in the making. Puerto Rico, Guam, other territories, countries have come in, beat other countries, taken their land. Israel is different. They never wanted it to begin with. All they wanted to do is live in peace. And the Palestinian people, under the authority of terrorists, never wanted the same goal. So it's really hard to be neighbors with a bully that hates you and screams and teaches children to run the Jew into the sea, to kill them and destroy them. That is genocidal language. All right, my friends. Well, thank you for spending time with me on this broadcast. I hope this clears up the history of Gaza, how Israel became Israel. And I know I did it in a 30,000-foot view level, but I hope it clears it up and makes it a little bit more sense what's going on and what will likely happen. All right, I'm Jim Staley with Passion for Truth Ministries. I'll see you in the next video.